Welcome. You've entered a sacred stillness, the kind that only comes after everything has fallen silent. Tonight's journey will be a slow walk through dust and dignity, through grief and grace. Guided by the story of a man named Job. His name may stir memories of suffering, of patience, of questions shouted into a heaven that didn't answer. But tonight, we're not here for answers. We're here to rest in the mystery, to let the ash settle, to listen to whispers in the wind, to feel the weight and quiet of what it means to be human. We'll begin with the rhythms of his daily life, the world he once knew, steady and full. Then we'll witness the unraveling his story of loss, his trial of silence. After that, we'll wander the strange edges of the tale where heaven and earth meet, and questions hang in the air like incense. And finally, we'll look from above, comparing Job's ashes to the altars of kings. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the story carry you. You don't have to make sense of it. You only need to be here. Daily life in the land of Uzi before the winds howled. Before the messengers came, Job lived in the land of Uz. It is a place you will not find on modern maps. Distant, old, perhaps mythical. But in the world of the Bible, it was real enough. A quiet region east of the Jordan, touched by desert breezes and caravan trails. Job's life was whole. Not perfect, not flashy, but full. He was a man of the earth, of herds and harvests, of olive groves and flocks. He walked fields dusted in morning light, ran his fingers through ripening grain, and listened to the low hum of animals settling for the night. His household was large, 7 sons, 3 daughters, servants, oxen, camels, and sheep, so many that his name was known across the region. And still, Job was quiet, known not for his wealth, but for his wisdom, not for his authority, but for his reverence. Each day, his rhythms were rooted in gratitude. He rose early to offer sacrifices, not out of fear, but out of love. He watched the stars fade over his land and whispered blessings into the wind. His children would gather, feasting and celebrating, living fully. And Job, watching from a distance, would offer prayers just in case their hearts had drifted from the sacred. This was not anxiety, but attentiveness. He was a man attuned to the divine, not just in temples, but in the soil, in the sky, in the subtle silences between animal calls. Imagine yourself there, a guest in his home. You wake to the sound of goats being led out to pasture, the distant ringing of clay bells, the warm scent of barley stew. The stone walls of the house are cool in the morning. A servant pours water over your hands. The breeze carries the faint sound of singing. Job walks the perimeter of his land slowly, not with pride, but with purpose. Each step a prayer, each moment a kind of offering. This was a man whose life pulsed with quiet order. Each day folded gently into the next, until it didn't. Until everything he knew was taken. But before the storms came, before the boils and the ashes, Job's world was one of quiet abundance, and perhaps that's what made the silence that followed so deafening. Biography, the trial, the silence, and the voice from the whirlwind. The stillness broke like a branch beneath sudden weight. It began, as these things often do, with messengers. One by one, they came, dust on their cloaks, eyes wide with horror, bearing words that turned the world upside down. The oxen taken, the sheep burned, the servants slain, the camels raided, and finally, worst of all, his children gone in an instant. A house collapsed, and with it, a father's heart. Break time equals 2 south. Greater than Job did not cry out in anger. He did not curse the heavens or run into the wilderness. He tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground. Not in rage, in reverence. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away, he whispered. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Break time equals 2 south, greater than. But the testing was not over. Next came the body, boils, open, aching, relentless. Job sat in the ashes, scraping at his skin with broken pottery, not to end the pain, but to understand it. His wife, trembling with her own grief, urged him, curse God and die. But Job would not. He was not angry. Not yet. He was bewildered, stunned by the quiet, the silence of heaven. Break time equals 2 south, greater than then came the friends. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, they came to comfort and stayed to accuse. They sat with him in silence for 7 days, and then they spoke. Surely, they said, you must have sinned. Again and again, they tried to make sense of the suffering, tried to defend the system, tried to protect their version of God. But Job knew the truth. He had done nothing to deserve this. And so he did what few dared. He questioned, why was I born? Why do the wicked prosper? Why is God silent? His prayers turned raw, his lamentations long. He asked not for restoration, but for revelation. Break time equals 2 south, greater than, and then finally the whirlwind. Out of the storm, a voice, not soft, not angry, but vast. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? It was not an answer. It was a question, one that echoed through the bones. The divine voice did not explain suffering. It revealed mystery. It unfolded creation, stars, storms, sea creatures, the paths of lightning and the womb of the dawn. It reminded Job that he was small, yes, but not forgotten. Break time equals 2 south, and Job replied, I had heard of you with my ears, but now my eyes have seen you. In the end, he was restored. His fortune doubled, his family renewed, but that is not the point. The point is the journey, the silence, the ashes, the whisper that rose from the whirlwind. Mystery, the cosmic bet, divine courtrooms, and the unseen lessons imagined now, not a field, not a desert, but a realm beyond sight. A court vast and bright, where stars are witnesses and winds carry secrets. It begins with a meeting. The sons of God gathered, celestial beings who move at the speed of thought. Among them came the accuser. The Hebrew calls him Hasatan, not a name, but a title. The adversary, the challenger. He did not sneer. He did not lie. He asked a question. Does Job fear God for nothing? Break time equals 2 south, greater than. It was not an attack on Job's character. It was a challenge to the very structure of faith. If blessings bring worship, what happens when blessings are taken away? Would Job still love God in ruin? And so permission was given. Not a punishment, a test. But this test was wrapped in silence. Job never knew. He was never told of the wager, the courtroom, the cosmic curiosity. To him, it was simply collapse, loss, pain, loneliness. This is the great mystery of Job's story. Not only what is said, but what is hidden. Scholars have long debated its meaning. Was Job historical or poetic? Is the voice from the whirlwind an answer or an enigma? In ancient midrash, rabbis described Job as a non-Israelite sage, a man of wisdom outside the covenant, yet still beloved by the eternal. Some say Job's story parallels that of Israel, blessed, broken, exiled, and eventually restored. Others see it as a protest, a divine permission slip to question God without shame. Even the ending raises questions. His wealth returns. New children are born. Peace is granted. But do new sons replace the ones lost? Does restoration erase the ache? The mystery remains. Job's wounds may have closed, but the scars, they stayed. And perhaps that too is sacred. In the margins of ancient manuscripts, scribes drew silent symbols beside this story, hands uplifted, eyes closed. Not to explain, but to witness, and so we too. Witness the divine court, the silent test, the mystery of undeserved pain. We cannot solve it, but we can sit beside it and let it breathe. Job's ashes vis, the thrones of men. Now let us turn from the ashes to the halls of power. In Job's day, kings sat on carved thrones. They ruled from high places, surrounded by polished stone and perfumed halls. Scribes recorded their edicts, soldiers guarded their sleep, and silver goblets shimmered at their tables. But Job sat in dust. His throne was a pile of broken pottery. His robes were torn. His crown, if he ever wore one, was replaced by silence. This is the contrast. In the ancient world, power meant proximity to temples, to kings, to wealth. But Job, in his suffering, was far from all free. He had no court, no priest to defend him, no riches to ransom his peace. And yet, the voice of the Almighty chose to speak to him, not to a monarch, not to a prophet, but to a man in ashes. This contrast is no accident. It reflects a deeper truth, that divine presence is not reserved for palaces. That revelation often comes to those the world has forgotten. Job's friends believed in the equations. Righteousness equals reward. Wickedness equals ruin. But Job's very life refuted that. He was righteous, and still he suffered. And when he questioned it, he wasn't condemned. He was answered. Not with comfort, but with presence. Not with justice, but with awe. We contrast him too with ancient emperors, those who built towers of pride, demanded offerings, and silenced dissent with the stroke of a blade. They ruled with fear. Job ruled with reverence. His legacy was not in monuments, but in a whispered line, spoken from the center of the storm. Now my eyes have seen you. He did not conquer lands. He did not command armies. But he won something deeper, an audience with the unseen, a glimpse of the infinite. And that is the great reversal. Stillness after the storm, and now the fire has cooled. The storm has passed. The ash settles into quiet patterns upon the ground. You've walked with Job, through wealth, through ruin, through silence and through the whirlwind. You've watched him lose, question, listen, and live again. But more than his story, you've touched something deeper, the ache of not knowing, the strange peace of surrender. Job's tale is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a mirror. A mirror for those who stood awake at night, asking why. A mirror for the ones who love God, but do not always understand Him. Break time equals 2 south. And so if tonight you carry questions, if you sit in your own quiet places, wondering if heaven hears, let Job's journey remind you. Sometimes the silence is the answer. Sometimes the ashes become sacred. And even when no one else understands, God speaks not in fire, but from the depths of your being. He sees. He knows. He remains. Break time equals 2 south. So let your breath slow. Let your body soften. And let your heart remember what Job discovered. That even in sorrow, even in silence, you are never alone. Break time equals 3 south, greater than sleep now, with the comfort of ancient faith wrapped around you. The story may fade, but the presence remains. Until next time, rest in peace. And may your night be gentle